All right, hello again and welcome to this panel discussion on the importance of science-backed nutrition and fitness at the second edition of Abbott Presents The Economic Times Delivering Nutrition Summit 2021, brought to you by ET Unwired. There are several misconceptions regarding nutrition and dietary needs of a human body, which should be highlighted, such as lemon water and green tea help in losing weight, about food supplements, etc. In this discussion, we shall bust these misconceptions and take a look into the daily Indian diets and the exclusion of protein, what science says about the best way to eat, and what we're still figuring out. So without further ado, let me invite our eminent speakers for this very important discussion. I'm privileged to invite Dr. Anish Desai, Chief, Expert Medical and Scientific Advocacy Board and ENAC, and Director in Telemed Healthcare Solutions. A warm welcome to Dr. Ganesh Kade, as Associate Director, Medical and Scientific Affairs at Abbott Nutrition. We also welcome Mr. Balakrishna Reddy Davedi, Co-founder and Director of FITTER. A warm welcome to Mr. Prashant B. Bhatt, Chief R&D Officer, Mother Dairy Fruits and Vegetables. We welcome Dr. Neerja Hajela, Head of Science and Regulatory Affairs at Yakult Danone, India. And we welcome our panel moderator, Ms. Nazneen Hussain, National Committee Member, Indian Dietetic Association, IDA. So without further ado, I hand over to you, Ms. Hussain.
Thank you, Deepti, for this wonderful introduction. And indeed, it is our pleasure to welcome you all today afternoon to this very important and very relevant topic of importance of science-backed nutrition and fitness. And we have a very, very eminent panel, as we've just heard their introduction. So I'm going to start right away that in the recent past 2 years, we've seen a lot on how the pandemic actually has affected, and the nutrition definitely has come into limelight by leaps and bounds. So with that background, Dr. Kade, my first question is to you. What do we mean by malnutrition, and how does it really affect people of all ages, and how does one actually handle it? We've been talking about it for the longest time, but we're still not able to crack the solution.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thanks, Nazanin, for the question. Although this question looks very simple, but it's important for all of us to understand. Just to make the matter simple for the audience, I'll just say that the malnutrition has three broad spectrum. On one side, there is undernutrition, where there is less intake, which actually lead to your stunting and wasting in severe cases. Then on other side, there is overnutrition leading to overweight and obesity. But the important point to remember is that there is also a third aspect to malnutrition, actually, which is called as hidden hunger. And this hidden hunger is nothing but the micronutrient deficiencies. All of us know that the way the vitamin D or vitamin B12 deficiency has given the shockers to Indian population is really striking. So malnutrition actually per se has three broader aspects. Coming to the second question, which age is get affected? So actually, frankly speaking, there is no age. If you see even now, even before our baby's birth, the malnutrition can strike. The malnourished mother can lead to a malnourished child, and that's why the low birth weight is one of the important condition actually affecting the India. So right from the infancy to the toddler to the adolescent to the adult and old age, actually malnourishment can definitely affect each and every age group. Apart from the physical growth and the physical impact on the physical growth, malnourishment, as you all know, that has impact on the social, economical, social, intellectual, and emotional as well as economical factor, because ultimately a better nutrition and a better health actually gives the quality human capital for the nation. How to handle it? Actually, we can actually broadly classify at two levels. The first level is at the national level, which actually gives a very broader perspective. It's very broad topic, so I will not get much into in detail. But all the stakeholders, right from the government regulators to the HCPs, healthcare professionals, dietitians, and the industry players, and ultimately the consumers as well. All of us actually need to come together and come to the solution finding. India is doing very well in terms of the progress in handling this at the national level. Let it be the regulatory framework, the policy framework, and the execution, and also the R&D, the research and development with the data generation. We already covered the good basic data, and now the need is for the advanced research. Getting into the new product or the disease specific product like FSDUs and FSMPs. So that is at the national level, but at the personal level, I'll just I'll just give one quick message: is that be aware of what you eat. Okay, be aware of that. Then there's a multidisciplinary expertise available. Just approach the expertise, get yourself evaluated what you eat and where you want to make the change, and always strive for a sustainable behavioral change. That will definitely will lead to a behavioral change to have a right diet and a right nutrition.
Thank you, Dr. Ganesh. I think some very, very important points he spoke about hidden hunger and malnutrition. And although it looks very simple today, we are also triple malnutrition and there are a lot of factors involved. And I think you gave some very relevant points. So thank you for that. Moving on from there, my next question is to Mr. Prashant Bhatt. And sir, how has science and technology actually helped in improving this entire nutritional status? And we just heard Dr. Kade speaking about malnutrition and across large masses of people through fortification. What is your experience on the same?
Sure. Thanks for this question, and good afternoon to all participants. In fact, Mother Dairy's efforts around fortification, they started a few decades ago. It was in 1984 when there was a huge prevalence of night blindness, and the Ministry of Foods recommended to the dairy industry that they add vitamin A into milk. And we took the lead at that time and introduced vitamin A in our token milk. Token milk is the milk that we sell through our booths in Delhi and in the neighboring regions in the unpackaged format, where the consumer would bring their own utensil and collect the milk. So we introduced vitamin A in this format of milk in 1984. That was a time when there was a milk scarcity, and over a period of time, now we have become the largest producer as well as consumer of milk globally. As this token milk as we moved from token milk fortification towards the pouch milk, so there has been a lot of I think significant benefit that could be delivered to a large mass of consumers. So we introduced vitamin A as well as D in our vegetable oil brand, which is Dhara, because the penetration of oil in the Indian household is close to 99%. So every household uses at least 30 grams of oil per day, per person. So delivery of vitamin A and D through vegetable oil is a great concept. Similarly, in our pouch milk, we introduced in 2016. So a very large set of consumers can be benefit out of this. From a deficiency perspective, vitamin A as well as D, the prevalence of deficiency is really alarming. In the case of vitamin A, the amount of vitamin A that a person gets from a diet, nearly like 85% of the population only has 50% or lower vitamin A through their diet. So it essentially needs fortification because most of the Indian diets are lacking both in vitamin A as well as D. And most of the rich sources of these vitamins are non-vegetarian sources. India being the predominantly vegetarian population, we don't have enough vitamin A and D through our food. And milk being a complete food in itself and its penetration into households is significantly high. It acts as a very good vehicle of delivering these vitamins to a large masses. From a science perspective, like we need to ensure distribution of these small quantities of micronutrients in our large silos, right? So our silo sizes would be anywhere between 50,000 liters to 1 lakh liters. So how do you distribute these small quantities throughout these silos is a very important aspect, and technology plays a role there. And also, how do you check the quantities of vitamin A, which is in very microgram level, through the right methods, just to monitor whether we are actually delivering the right quantities or not. So science and technology has helped both in the case of having the right distribution of these micronutrients in the milk, as well as its validation through the tests.
Some very relevant points there by Mr. Prashant. And I think it's very interesting that you actually started this journey early, almost around 40 years back. And today fortification is a very recognized and a safe process. And very, very interesting work there. Dr. Anish, a lot of work also is, currently done in the nutraceutical scenario. And so my question is, evidence-based nutraceutical, what is, where do we stand currently? How do we perceive this entire scenario?
Yeah, so thanks for the question, Nazneen. What has happened over a period of time is that the nutraceuticals have moved from being a kind of ancillary care or allied care to being the mainstream. In fact, the last 18 months has shown that when we didn't have any kind of therapies, when we didn't have a vaccine, when we didn't have any specific drug to manage the COVID-19 pandemic, nutrition and nutraceuticals were playing a predominant role. So whether it was immunity, there was a lot of talk which was going on about zinc, vitamin C. There was a lot of talk which was going on other phytochemicals and phytonutrients, which were a part of the whole immune system. And while this was happening, what we realized is that there's a large body of evidence available on nutraceuticals. And if we have to move the nutraceuticals to the mainstream, we have to have a large focus on it. We need to look at evidence-based medicine. So the term that I've coined is basically pharmacological basis of nutraceutical evidence-based approach. So we need to see how do we really generate the evidence, how do we, communicate the benefits of these nutraceuticals to all the stakeholders, especially to the patients and to the consumers, so that they are able to achieve superior patient outcomes. In fact, one of the things that has happened in the nutraceutical is that there are so many over-the-counter nutraceuticals, and there are a lot of claims which are being made, which many of them are at sometimes unsubstantiated. And that's where, again, if you see several, delivery companies are trying to deliver nutraceuticals through their channels without really looking at the whole quality and the whole clinical benefits aspect of it. And that's where I believe that evidence-based approach to nutraceutical is very important. If we look at the data, there is a large amount of data available on all the nutraceuticals that we are talking of, whether they are immunity-based nutraceuticals. Even if you look at common nutraceuticals or nutritional supplements like vitamin C, zinc, probiotics, selenium, all these vitamin D, there's a large body of evidence available. There are large meta-analysis available which are there. There are randomized controlled trials. And that needs to be analyzed. That needs to be really discussed with all the stakeholders. And I think whenever the companies when there is a discussion happening on nutraceuticals, we need to discuss evidence-based approach. We need to see how exactly they would give us good outcomes. And that's where I feel that if we have to go to the next level in the nutrition and nutraceutical, then an evidence-based approach is going to be critical.
I completely reiterate that, Dr. Anish. In fact, whilst the industry is growing leaps and bounds, but there is a lot of, general confusion. People are buying a lot of OTC drugs. There are a lot of health claims. In fact, just interestingly, whilst you were speaking, I just like to brief that we also started this whole course for health professionals on, nutraceuticals to educate them a little. So once they understand better, eventually we are able to translate this whole thing to consumers better. And I think a lot more work needs to be done on side effects, food interaction, nutraceutical drug interaction. So I think some fantastic points brought in by you. Thank you so much for all your inputs. Our next question is also to Dr. Neerja. Dr. Neerja has done some fantastic work on gut health. And so, Dr. Neerja, how is nutrition or uptake of nutrients linked with the gut and the microbes? And you've done some phenomenal work in the whole space. So your comments on that.
Thank you, Nazneen. Thank you very much for this question and for this opportunity as well. So while we are talking about nutrition and we are talking about malnutrition and the whole gamut of nutrition, I think nutrition and the gut are very intricately linked. We agree to that because the gut is the site for digestion of food, absorption of nutrients, and it is also the site for extracting all the energy that is needed for our healthy growth and development. Now, the gut basically cannot function without its microbes. And these microbes have actually co-evolved with the host. So in the gut, you have 100 trillion microorganisms. They are almost 1.5 kg in weight. We have 1,000 different species of microbes, and they perform functions which the host cannot. So they play a very, very critical role in the development of the intestine and its function. And therefore, the microbes and the gut is one whole unit. Now, the genes that these microbes harbor are about 3 million genes, which are 150 times that of what you have in a human being. So the question is, who is the host? But the gut and its microbes, they work in tandem, and they make important contribution in human nutrition and metabolism because they contain enzymes which are not encoded by the human genome. So they play important role in degradation or breakdown of polyphenols and polysaccharides. And, for instance, sugars, your table sugar, lactose, this is very quickly absorbed in the upper part of the small intestine. But then you have your non-digestible fibers, you have starches, you have pectin, you have cellulose. These non-digestible foods, they travel all the way down to the large intestine. And it is these microbes, because of the enzymes that they encode, that they can digest these foods and convert them into something which is known as short chain fatty acid. I think we've heard a lot about it. There's a lot of talk about probiotics and short chain, and it's these short chain fatty acids which are a major source of energy for the human body. So you have acetate, you have propionate, you have butyrate. These are different short chain fatty acids, and they play a very, very important role in not only providing energy, but also they are a major source for prevention of diseases, especially cancers and inflammatory bowel disorders. Other than that, these microbes play a very, very important role in boosting our immunity, because about 70% of the body's immune system, which is known as the gut-associated lymphoid tissue, it is located in the gut. So these microbes are very critical for building your immunity. They also help in basically breaking down toxic compounds. And many of these microbes have the ability to synthesize vitamins, especially the B group of vitamins and vitamin K. So these enzymes, which are responsible for making these vitamins, are not found in plants or animals, but are only present in these particular microbes. Now, very interestingly, there are studies which have shown that these microbes can actually play an important role in harvesting, storage, as well as expenditure of energy from the diet. So you'll be surprised to know that the microbes which a lean person harbors is very, very different from what an obese person will harbor. So there is a link between these microbes as well as obesity. But today what's happening because of our changing lifestyle, because of our Western diet, we are basically losing the beneficial microbes, which are very, very important for a healthy digestion as well as immunity. So when we talk about nutrition, or it is incomplete without the role of the gut or its microbes to ensure that we get the best from the foods that we are eating.
Thanks, Dr. Neerja. I think the gut as the second brain is a well-established concept, and there's a lot out there, which we don't know and still requires massive amount of research. So thank you so much for those. Moving on, we have another very interesting panelist who is working deeply into the sports and the fitness industry. So, Dr. Bala, in your opinion, we saw two ends of the pandemic. One where people, slowly moved towards metabolic problems, and the others who actually geared up to sports, fitness, and yet another population of young sports athletes who are, who have been impacted by COVID. So your comments on that, please.
Thank you so much for the question, Nazneen. Well, we all know that COVID-19 pandemic affected the world. Everything shut down, and the sports industry is no exception, actually. As soon as the lockdowns came into force, access to training centers was one of the first things which had limited access or maybe completely remote, right? And naturally, this meant that athletes, from everywhere in India couldn't train at their optimal levels. And even athletes wanting to represent the state, the country, were also not able to gain access to these sports facilities. Sport-specific training took the biggest hit because the specialized facilities required for training were off limits in most of the cases. However, some athletes, even though couldn't work on their sport specific performance optimally, they at least worked on their overall fitness levels. So they started finding creative ways to keep their general fitness levels high without even having access to gyms or other facilities. Naturally, all this meant that the sports industry wasn't doing well. I would say wasn't doing great at all. At least in the initial phases. Once the situation across the globe started looking better, access to sports facilities have become easier. So it slowly picked it up, right? So today I can say that there is some fear which is still there among the athletes and among the general population on moving to gyms and sports facilities for getting access to this. But today I can say fear is slowly decreasing as more and more people have received the second dose of their vaccines, and even the experts are saying that the Omicron variant might not be so deadly as Delta, right? So I believe that fitness industry in general is seeing a recovery today, right? With many people thinking about going back to the gyms or sports facilities or other forms of training to stay fit. And it's natural because as soon as the pandemic has hit, gyms were closed. Overall fitness levels fell drastically in most of the population, majorly because the inability to keep up their physical activity levels. And many of these people would definitely want to get back to their old fitness levels as soon as possible. I would also say that online fitness companies definitely saw a boom during this pandemic. Some of these companies started offering creative ways of for people to get fit with nothing more than just a smartphone or a laptop and household items to get fit, right? So naturally, people had understood that the value of staying fit and rush to try these platforms out, and they definitely enjoyed the benefits. Today, online fitness is booming because it offers a convenient, scientific, and economical way for people to stay fit. So overall, while COVID definitely impacted the industry negatively at first, things seem to be trending upwards now.
I completely, echo your point that yes, we seem to be getting back, and with the Olympics and India winning a lot of goals and a lot of medals, a lot of Indian athletes are now slowly aspiring. In fact, the pandemic has created a whole, created a lot of, awareness also, where people want to take up sports and fitness in a huge way. So I think those are very relevant comments. Thank you for that. So, Dr. Kade, in this whole scenario, how do you see this entire nutrition space trending up?
Okay, very interesting question, and I was hearing. Definitely, I agree with because if you really see the trend which are coming up and broadly, and the execution of those behaviors. And also there are other dimensions to it. So on the behavioral side, the people definitely interest motivation due to this pandemic. Okay, so good motivation towards fitness is not only the physical fitness here, because the people have understood the holistic approach for the fitness, that is a wellness. Okay, so people are actually looking out for a better health in terms of say going for various diagnostic tests, or maybe using some devices for better health or telemedicine availability. Then better fitness, as Bala has said rightly, there are companies and there are resources available at the household also. You can actually maintain your fitness. Coming to our current topic, that is better nutrition. So definitely there is a shift towards so balanced nutrition, having a better choices for nutrition, and also the better sleep and the mental health. So overall, actually, because of this pandemic, what I see the trend is for the better holistic approach for the better wellness. Now, as Anish has also said, that the emphasis on the science-backed nutrition, or the scientific nutrition, or the evidence-based nutrition actually is a need, and definitely I see that the trend is also going towards supporting and also using the science-based or the evidence-based nutrition. There is a proactive approach for the immunity as well, as we all know. Let's not get into that. Coming to the food choices, I must say that the people are more open to experiment in their daily food choices or daily recipes, and also to incorporate newer food available, or the diet available, maybe a plant-based protein, or the non-dairy sources of milk, or maybe the novel ingredients like maybe carnitine or HMB, or high protein diet, protein dense diet. So the choices are also there, and people are more ready to try that and incorporate that in their nutritional choices. They're open to try the new dietary options like the keto diet or the fasting regimen. But here, word of caution is, I think everybody needs to consult the expert before actually getting into this kind of options. Other dimensions to it is the role of technology, and as we all know that the digital there's a digital transformation, and the technology in fitness domain actually is getting used in mainly three areas. One is the knowledge and awareness. People are visiting various sites to get more insights, more aware about the food and the diet. There is assessment tools. There are many companies and many apps available actually, where the people are going and getting their diet, physical strength, and other parameters assessed, and also the monitoring tools. So digital transformation definitely is a more is upcoming trend, and I believe that it will stay for long. Currently, at a broader level, if you see, even before the pandemic, a few years, there is a globalization, and globalization has an impact on the choices of food we eat. So, frankly speaking, there is a shift from local to global. So, there is a global or westernized diet which is coming up, especially in the urban setup. The urbanization has also put its own impact, because now the people are more busy. There is a working class available; they don't have time. There's a stress on them, and that's why there's a shift from self-preparing food to the processed food available. So the food environment at the national level, and as well as at the personal level, at the home level, it is changing. What is important is there is a variety of food choices available, but making the right choice is a key, and that's why actually it is important. I will say that without right knowledge about the food, the dietary freedom will be dangerous. Hence, we need to be aware, but need to be vigilant.
Thank you, Dr. Kade. Those were a lot of fantastic inputs, right from globalization to food to, so many points covered. I think very, very relevant inputs. And we have seen this entire nutrition space trending in a very, very different way, and a lot of interest even from consumers and local people. And I think Dr. Kade made a very important point that consult qualified people. I think that's also a very important message for all you audience out there. So thank you so much for that. Mr. Prashant, India is taking it on from all the globalization and all the nutrition trends Dr. Kade left with. We have seen that as Indians, we are sarcopenic, we are, overall people eat low proteins. So how is the sector of milk and dairy helping in addressing all these protein requirements in our diet?
Sure. This is a very important thing because proteins are the building blocks of the body. They are required in several metabolic functions, starting from the production of hormones to the maintenance of muscle, building your bones, and even immunity. And on an average, one would need anywhere between say 60 to 75 grams of protein every day. And protein can't be stored in the body. Whatever is the excess protein, it gets discarded. When you come to the Indian diet, unfortunately, our diet has been traditionally lacking in proteins. It has been always more of a carbohydrate-based diet than a protein-based diet, unlike in Europe or say in the Western countries. So what has happened is because of this, I think nearly 85% of Indian population is deficient in protein. In most of the households, the major source of protein would be the dal. And one serving of dal cannot give more than say 8 or 9 grams of protein. And you cannot have 10 servings of dal every day. It is too huge a quantity. Similarly, milk delivers around say 7-8 grams of protein per glass, but you can't have 10 glasses of milk a day. So it is very important that we introduce the concentrated formats of proteins, such as say paneer in the case of milk product, or say a nut like a peanut, or say an egg, or say non-vegetarian products like chicken or say meat. It is important that each one of us has enough protein in their diet. So what ICMR has done is earlier there used to be a food pyramid, right? So you had the different types of food that have been recommended. And the recommendation was sometime in 1980s. So it has been very popular so far. Now what they have done is they have given a plate where half of the plate should be a blend of vegetables and fruits, which take care of the fiber and the micronutrients part. And that is around say 40% of the total plate. And 30 to 35% is related to proteins. It can be say eggs, fish, milk, or say pulses, beans, etc. And only around say 25% is recommended in the form of carbohydrates. Earlier our diets used to have carbohydrates with a lot of bran and fiber in it, but nowadays that also is gone. So we tend to use a lot of maida and the polished rice, etc. So even the fiber part we are missing. So it is important that we have this right kind of balance of different sources of nutrients, be it micronutrient or say macronutrient, to be healthy. And milk and milk products can play a very important role. So like currently the per capita availability of milk is around 400 ml. And it is a complete food. And there can be like more concentrated formats of protein such as paneer, khoya, etc. that can be introduced in our diets.
Thank you so much for all those inputs. And yes, milk has been an integral part of the Indian plate, and a lot of work needs to be done on us as Indians upping our protein content. So thank you so much for all the relevant inputs. Dr. Nirja, taking it on from here, why is the concept of probiotics becoming so popular? What makes them so different from our traditional fermented foods?
Thanks, Nazneen, for the question. So basically, the concept probiotics, the word probiotics literally means for life. And like I said, that we harbor 100 trillion microbes in our gut. And these microbes are both good and bad. So some of them are beneficial for us, and the beneficial ones ensure a strong digestive system, a strong immune system, reduce risk of infections, and generally improve our overall health. Whereas the harmful components, what they do for us is they cause disease, they weaken our immune system, they influence our digestive processes negatively, and overall down our health. So probiotics are nothing but these are scientifically tested bacteria which have been tested to reach our intestine alive in very large numbers. So if you see probiotic products in the market, most of them contain probiotics in numbers of billions. The FSSAI recommendation is 10 to the power 8 bacteria per recommended serving size per day. So you have these billions of bacteria which are scientifically tested. They reach your gut alive and they increase the beneficial components and they reduce the harmful components, and therefore they improve your digestive system, they boost your immunity and give you better health. So what happens is that the concept of probiotics is actually linked to these microbes, the gut microbes. Today, in the last 10 years, we have learned that these gut microbes play an important role in almost every aspect of health, not just gut health, but also metabolic disorders. Now, you just spoke about the gut-brain axis. So the gut is the second brain of the human body, and it is also connected to the brain through the vagus nerve. So the gut controls your brain and vice versa. So with these microbes, when you have a depletion of the beneficial microbes, almost every aspect of human health is affected. You are more prone to diseases, you may have metabolic disorders, you have even symptoms of depression and anxiety are linked to these harmful microbes. So probiotics help to increase these beneficial microbes and thereby improve gut health and also boost your immune system, because 70% of our immunity is found there. Now, yes, there is a lot of confusion around traditional fermented foods and probiotics, because probiotics are also lactic acid bacteria. Most of them are lactic acid bacteria, and all our traditional fermented foods also contain lactic acid bacteria. The only difference here is that the lactic acid bacteria, which are found in traditional fermented foods, they are not scientifically tested to reach the intestine alive to give you a scientifically validated health benefit. Probiotics, on the other hand, they reach your intestine alive to give you a scientifically validated health benefit. So while our traditional fermented foods are excellent for nutrition, if they're a part of our daily diet, I mean, I would never give up any one of my foods, especially that katuri of dahi for anything else, So it's a part of my diet, but it does not impart a scientifically proven health benefit, which would mean improving your digestive health or building your immune system or reducing risk of a particular infection. So traditional fermented foods are good for nutrition, whereas probiotics, on the other hand, just help to strengthen your gut health, boost your immunity, and reduce risk of several infections. So today they are scientifically validated, and you have a lot of scientific data, meta-analysis, randomized controlled trials, which have shown that probiotics can help benefit in different conditions. But a point to make here is that probiotic benefits are strain specific. So every probiotic is not going to give you the same health benefit. So like we heard just now, that scientific validation is very, very important. So whatever the probiotic be or whatever the product be, it must be scientifically validated with its own dossier of data and evidence.
Thanks. I think Neerja made it very clear that, the probiotic needs to have a certain strength, it is strain specific and many inputs. Thanks, Neerja, for that. And Dr. Anish, whilst we all want to eat nutrition from our plate, but increasingly, I think the gap is becoming bigger and bigger, and we are not able to get everything from food alone. So what is the role of nutraceutical in health and disease? And, today a lot of people also use it for better health and better performance and, aging. So your comments on that.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So in fact, if you look at it, what we look at today is food as medicine. And we look at food as medicine. What has happened is that, or it's also what is the kind of food we eat. What is the quantity of food we eat, the quality of food which we eat. Over a period of time, what has happened is that so much of processing has gone into the whole picture that the kind of food we get is devoid of several nutrients which are required. The junk food which we talk of it is again a major issue. So when we look at food, we should be taking all balanced diets. We should be taking the right quantity of fats, proteins, carbohydrates, as has been suggested, as the new normal, as you suggested, what ICMR is talking of. However, many times the food may not be contributing to the nutrients that we are looking at it. Some of the examples are there is that when we look at curcumin, and we say that there is a lot of turmeric which we use in our diet. But is that lot of turmeric which we use, is it bioavailable? So these are the questions which we need to look at it, that the kind of food we eat, is it really giving us the exact nutrition that we are looking? And that's where we need to look at supplementation. We need to look at supplementation based on what exactly is your body structure, what exactly is your the way you are having your daily functioning which is there, what are your nutritional needs, your age. So these are different factors needs to be considered, and we need to look at it, because one of the biggest issue with as mentioned earlier is vitamin D deficiency is so rampant in the country, protein energy deficiency. So we need to supplement that along with the food, and therefore that's the role which comes in, where you combine food, you combine medicines, and we look at food as medicines, and that's where that whole evidence-based part of food and medicine needs to be looked at it. We also need to see what exactly a new branch has emerged, which you would know it very well, is nutrigenomics. Is that what kind of nutritional supplements are important to me may not be important to the other person. There is a genetic predisposition to several diseases which we have seen. In fact, we were doing a study on obesity and in bariatric surgery, and we realized that genetically people could be classified as people who are genetically very have a low weight, genetically who are obese, and genetically who have a good way of looking at losing and gaining weight. So we need to look at newer areas. We need to look at innovation which is there, and that's where we have to evaluate. And as mentioned by Ganesh, we need to look at expert advice. We need to look at somebody who understands what exactly are your needs, and that's where I think one of the areas that I these days very commonly talk about is functional medicine. So functional medicine is not something which is alternative medicine, but it is basically hardcore medicine, going to the root cause of medicine which is there. In fact, when I started reading about functional medicine, what I realized that it is to do with how your basic body mechanisms are working. Your Krebs cycle, how is it working? How is your TCA cycle which is working? As mentioned, how exactly is your gut microbiota? So there's a lot of core medicine into it, and that's where when you look at this core medicine, the supplementation of nutraceuticals, the probiotic supplementation, taking good healthy diet comes into it. At the same time, we also need to see how is your body functioning, because when you look at all these food nutritional supplements and nutraceuticals, the food interactions or the food drug interactions are also important to look at it. As we commonly know, the iron and calcium cannot be taken together. So these are some of the common things which needs to be looked at, so that how do you really look at those food and nutrition. One of the most important aspect comes during the supplementation part of it, and when you look at food as medicine, is also your circadian rhythm, because many times what you eat, what the supplements you take at certain points of time may not be really giving you that optimal benefit that you are looking for it. And again, having that sleep and the light pattern is also very important. So it's a whole kind of balancing your metabolism, balancing your root causes, and seeing how nutrition, food can actually help you to have a healthy life, how it can help you in maintaining your wellness, maintaining your healthy lifestyle, at the same time preventing of diseases. We know that several kinds of food or nutraceuticals, we look at it. We look at CoQ10s, we look at phytonutrients, we look at tocotrienols. Several of these are there which are helping you to prevent certain diseases. Or even when you look at these nutraceuticals, they can help you to delay some of the diseases which are there. So you need to have a 360-degree view of food and nutrition along with the body composition to really get the optimal health and beneficial effects.
Thank you so much for that, and I completely reiterate that a 360-degree view of everything is required. And when you look at food as medicine, it can actually heal, and a lot more can be done. And Dr. Bala, this is for you. So, with a lot of emphasis on sports and fitness, what are some of the segments you envisage seeing gaining a lot of momentum?
If we see in the near future, I think we can't really say whether things will gain momentum just yet. With the number of Omicron variant cases, we still have to wait and watch how this variant affects these segments. I know experts are saying that Omicron variant is less deadly, but they're also saying it's more transmissible, right? And first, I think we need to understand this variant completely before making any predictions. But now, if there is a third wave, and access to sporting facilities will again be mostly limited, which will impact these segments negatively. And even if there is no lockdowns, and let's say Omicron is not seen as a major threat, people are going to still be fearful, right? Even if they're vaccinated, even if they're athletes or aspiring athletes, to be honest. But once the COVID situation is under control, and at least mostly, I can predict a big boom in the overall fitness industry. People who have lost their game, so to speak, will want to get back to their original fitness levels. Just like some economists are speaking about revenge shopping. I see a kind of revenge training trend emerging in the post-COVID future, right? See, nowadays, people are understanding that fitness is for everyone, just like not just for athletes. And we're seeing so many people with a lot of lifestyle disorders, and these have really instilled an interest towards taking up fitness as part of their regime. Especially younger people are giving more importance to health and body composition than ever before, right? And as a result, training modes like Zumba, yoga, martial arts, kickboxing also are gaining prominence, along with people going to the gym and training for specific body composition results, or even including cardiovascular exercise, right? So, but in my opinion, resistance training and cardiovascular exercise should be incorporated in daily regime in every individual who is looking for optimal results, along with quantified nutrition, right? Along with the balanced nutrition. So I believe traditional fitness avenues like gyms will definitely see a resurgence in demand, as more and more people will be focusing on becoming the best version of themselves again. But yeah, even online business models are going to continue to see the growth, right? Some online fitness companies, including us, offer all forms of online training like resistance training, Zumba, yoga, martial arts, and it's going to be a big boom. And we're seeing it happening in front of our eyes.
Thanks, Bala. I think I like this terminology called revenge training, and I hope more and more people get inspired to kind of come back with a vengeance and train and be the best version of themselves. I think I love the statement completely. So before we close down, one last statement from all you lovely panelists on what is your final take-home message for our audience. Dr. Ganesh Kade?
Okay. My statement and message would be nutrition is evolving. There's a lot of future for the nutrition, and it is a necessity now. It cannot be considered in a one-dimensional way, but it has to be put or placed in a multi-dimensional or multidisciplinary approach. We believe in a total wellness approach to maximize one's potential. So what is needed is to understand it better. So not only to understand, but consult the expert and take the use of whatever research and the best products are available. Make a use of that for the better life.
Thanks so much. Mr. Prashant?
Yeah, sure. I think this is the message to the people who are from the industry, who would be the possible participants here. Micronutrient deficiency is a very alarming thing in India. It not only affects the health, but also leads to economic damage because of less efficiency, less productivity. And there are very simple ways of introducing micronutrients to the products that you already have. They go in very small quantities, microgram levels, and the cost per kg or per liter is extremely low. For example, in milk, it costs just 3 paisa per liter to introduce these micronutrients. So more and more industries, more and more organized players need to introduce these nutrients in their products so that a large population can get rid of these deficiencies.
Thank you so much. Neerja, your comments, the last takeaway message.
Yeah, so my take home is that we all know that India is grappling with the triple burden of malnutrition. We have undernutrition, we have hidden hunger, we have overnutrition. So I think holistic nutrition will be very important. And this coupled with a healthy gut to ensure that you get the best from what you are consuming, I think will be the step forward, will be the way forward in the years to come.
Thanks so much. Dr. Anish?
Yeah, so my takeaway to all the members here and who are listening to us is that I think science-based nutraceutical nutrition is very, very important. You need to look at what exactly are the pharmacological basis, evidence-based approach, how it can give you superior outcomes. Look at the quality of the nutritionals and nutraceuticals that you're consuming. Look at the label claims. And I think that's very, very important that you finally take expert advice from a physician who's able to help you holistically and help you with a 360-degree management of your health and wellness.
Thanks. Thanks so much. Bala?
Yeah, so I actually echo with the rest of the panelists, and I do, emphasize that nutrition is really important, especially quantifying and making sure your nutritional needs are, adequately met. But we also have to understand that this pandemic has impacted people in a way where, our physical activity levels have dropped to extreme lows, and this is creating a problem. And we are seeing a large surge in people moving more towards an obese category of people. So I would encourage everyone who is listening to this to incorporate any form of training. It doesn't have to be weight training. It doesn't have to be any specific kind of training, anything which you can do for fun.
Yeah. Thanks, Bala. So I think it has been a fabulous panel. Thank you, panelists, for all your superb inputs. And on a closing note, I just like to say, as the food, so the mind, as the mind, so the man, which means food and nutrition has a direct impact. And over to Dipti, and thank you all for this fantastic panel discussion. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely there. Very well said, Ms. Hussain. And thank you so much for being a wonderful moderator. And a big, big thank you to our panelists for that enriching conversation. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we mark the closing of the Economic Times Delivering Nutrition Summit 2021, brought to you by ET Unwired. We attribute the success of this summit to all of our delegates and speakers, and of course, our partners for always supporting us. Our presenting partner, Abbott, our Concept to Counter Solutions partner, Vantage Nutrition, our gold partner, Be Sure Testo, our supporting associations, Association of Healthcare Providers India and International Health and Fitness Association. Once again, a big, big thank you to all of you. Let me remind you, delegates, to kindly post your thoughts on social media using the hashtag #ETNutritionSummit. You can also post them on the signature wall on the tab. Do remember to download your digital certificates of participation. Thank you all. This is your host, Deepti Diwan, signing off. Have a great evening ahead and do take good care of yourselves. See you.